Good afternoon. We're all here together for one reason, and that's John. And so as we get started today, I want to start by reading a passage of Scripture. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall hardship, persecution, nakedness, danger, sword, trouble? No, in all of these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither angels nor demons, neither the present or the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Now the Lord bless you today, and as we go through this service today, there's a lot of things that are going to take place. Some of it's going to involve dancing. No, I'm kidding. But what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about remembering and why we remember, and then Dave and Diana and some others have some things they want to share. And if you have something you would like to share, there'll be an opportunity for you to do that, okay? With the proviso of this. No 45-minute speeches. Okay? John was my friend. I can talk about him all day, so I know how this is. So we want to be sure we do that. So as we're here, the biggest thing we need to do, and one of the biggest important things in this kind of a setting, has to do with the idea of remembering. And I always like to start off there because that's what you're doing. You're here to remember. You're here to sort of close your eyes for a moment and let your mind wander back over the years and see what kind of memories percolate to the surface. And I'll tell you, did you look at these pictures? So I've only known for, maybe 6 years. And so these pictures were a revelation. This one of him as a gymnast, the guy was a dude. But, you go through the process of remembering. And pictures, you remember. See? And as you look at the pictures, that will do that. As you talk, you'll be sharing things, and remembering and sharing those things. As David and Diane and others get up and talk, they'll be sharing memories. All of that is so important. Because John's life is like a book that's now been read from cover to cover. And what's written on the pages of that book are the things that you remember. So in sharing these memories, you get to help each other fill in the pages. You get to help each other take as full a set of memories as you can. Now, fortunately for us, God is in His grace has built into us a mechanism for that. Is there anybody here with an eidetic memory? No, I've known a couple of guys that they couldn't forget anything if they tried. Most of us aren't like that, and most of us, even if we have a good memory, it's not arbitrary. I asked one time what happened on October 17th, 1972. One guy stood up and said, I know, what was his birthday? For everybody else, that date meant nothing because we don't remember that way. God has created us so that the things we remember are the things that touch our heart. And that can be good, that can be bad. That's why we will remember those moments, whether those moments are those moments of falling in love or whether those moments are, those moments driving into Yosemite or sitting at the beach during a beautiful sunset, or whether it's those moments you have together when something was so funny you just never forget it, and every time you think of it, what happens is when you remember those things that touched your heart, you re-feel the emotions of that moment. We've seen it here today. People come in and look at the picture and they remember that and they're smiling and they're laughing. You think, well, why are we laughing here? Well, because that's the way it works. Do you look at that picture, remember that, and everybody's sort of chuckling, oh, I remember that, and everybody's saying it's funny. We feel those emotions. And when you take the emotions from the memories and you bring them to the emotions of today, and you mix them together, it creates the fertile ground in which God can touch your heart. You see, when you remember John, and when you share those memories with each other, your heart is open to him. Your heart is open to each other. And all God needs to plant seeds of comfort and grace and love is a little bit of an open heart. And the very thing you do to help each other becomes the very thing you do that allows God to give you comfort. So share those memories. Share them together. As you do that, all kinds of things begin to take place. You begin to create, for lack of a better word, legacy. You begin to do things. I mean, when you go down the list, you look at did you get, David said, I don't, and I agreed with him, I don't know what you called this, but they're back there, take one. It has this picture, a tribute on the back, a little story of his life, and you get down there and you're looking at, survived by his little sister Sue, his ex-wife Sandy, who's still a good friend, David, Alyssa, Michael, Josh, Brittany, William, Tristan, also by Diana and Dennis and their kids, Peyton and husband Colin and Ethan and Carson, and it just goes on and on and on. I mean, this is great. That's what it is. It's children and grandchildren. That's what it is, right? Who's the youngest of all of them? Yeah. That one. It's him, everybody. How old are you? 17. Yeah, two 17-year-olds. Some of you are a little older. Do you remember being 17? I mean, I remember it. That was, going to school, getting out of high school, going on a mission trip down deep in Mexico for 6 weeks or 8 weeks and coming back. That was a big year for me. But I don't remember 16 at all. Now, I say that for a reason. Because hopefully, good Lord willing, I know their parents are probably praying for this. These guys will meet some young women that just touch their heart and they get married and they have kids. Isn't that how life works? And what they tell their kids cannot be about what they remember. What they tell their kids is about what all of you remember. You are creating a legacy of his life. See, it's not just for you. It's not just for today. It's not just so we feel better. It's so we can pass on the legacy of someone to the future generations. Because what that involves is something else that we're here to do. We're here to honor John. I think everybody would agree with that, right? That we come to these things to honor somebody. The question is, what in the world does that mean? How do you honor someone? I mean, you can describe someone as a person of honor. You can see somebody, they do something, you say that's an honorable act. You can use it in so many different, how do you honor someone? I told a story of a young kid who told me he could put the whole Bible in a sentence. And I said, sure, go ahead. He said, we take the love that God gives to us in Jesus and we give it to each other. I said, you not only nailed the whole message of the Bible, you nailed the concept of honor. You honor someone by taking the love they give to you and the good they give to you and giving it to each other. There's a lot of people here today. John had an impact on your life, or John had an impact on his family, and they had an impact on your life. How do you honor John? You take all of the good that he gave to you, and you give it to each other. Now, I'm not saying all the memories will be good. Never is. There's always tough things. But the difficult things and the tough things we go through define us and hone our character. And they become an important part. And besides, you have a choice. There's a little verse in the New Testament. I love that verse. There's a memorized scripture. I memorized that verse. You know what it says? Test everything. Hold on to that which is good. I love that verse. Easy. And that's what you want to do with John's life. Go through those memories. Hold on to the good stuff. And then share the good stuff with each other. And you remember him. You open your heart to him. You open your heart to each other. You open your heart to God. And you find those ways to honor him by taking the good he gave to you and giving it to each other. We tried to do that today. Do you see these little signs all around the church? Do you see those when you came in? They had moved. And we'll forgive them one day. John comes up to me one day and says, we need to do a little, we need to get something, we need to do some merchandising is the term he used. And he had all these signs made. He thought them up, designed them, and had them made. And to this day, on Sunday morning, we have a group of guys that come at 7 o'clock in the morning and put them out on the big boulevard out there because we're invisible. You notice that? We're the invisible church. And they put them out there on Soledad Canyon going both directions so people can see some message about Christ and God. I'll tell you what. We put those out so people can see the message about the church. But we put those out because we're honoring our friend. This was his heart. So grab a hold of those things. Hold on to the good stuff. And remember. Now we have several that are going to come up and talk and share a little bit, including, first off, David, then Diane, and then others, and then you'll have an opportunity there as well. So, David?
I thought you were going to take longer. All right. Thank you all for coming. Again, celebration. I'm not wearing black because, I don't know, my dad was used to seeing me in black heavy metal concert shirts my entire life. And he saw me in this Greg Norman shirt. He's like, that's my favorite shirt of yours. So that's why I'm wearing it. He was a cool dude, like we said. Everyone knew him. He was John, Grandpa, Papa, Johnny, to his little sister. Even John, as his best friend Glenn called him. And for Diane and me, he was Dad and Daddy when we were younger. I think he was still Daddy for Diana. Yes. But I outgrew that, So, been looking back to us growing up. We grew up on Key Biscayne, one of the most beautiful islands off the coast of Miami, a place that we were raised with no locked doors, no rules, basically just be home by dinner. And, my parents loved that island so much, as we did. And, Dad was, some dads were baseball coaches, soccer coaches, football coaches. My mom and dad, they came to all the games, but my dad was the neighborhood dad that loved hanging out with me and my friends, teaching us all bigger and better ways of having fun hurting ourselves, pretty much. If we had bike ramps that he didn't think were good enough or big enough, he made sure of finding stuff in the garage to come out and build them bigger and better so we could jump higher and farther and crash harder. If we were after trash day, we would go around the neighborhood, and back in the day, for all of y'all that are younger, all our trash cans used to be metal, and we would go and steal those from around the neighborhood and line them up after our ramps and jump them. And he came home from work one day and saw that and shook his head, and he's like, you guys need to go steal a plastic trash can from somebody and put it on the end so you're not crashing so bad when you're not making it. That was it. And, we would see him. He'd go up on the roof all the time. We had an antenna that he'd go up and do fixing stuff on the roof. And as you can see, he was a gymnast. And he would just run and jump off the roof and land and roll off, and that was it. And my friends and I saw that and said, well, that's pretty cool. So he comes home from work one day, and we're all sitting on the edge of the roof, jumping off and landing and not doing it right at all. He goes in, gets out of his suit, gets home, gets his suit, comes out in his jeans and T-shirt, or maybe he was in shorts at that time, I don't know, and he's like, okay, we need to learn how to do this right, and he taught us how to tuck and roll when we landed, and then he had us all back up on the roof, sitting on the edge, jumping off until we got it right, and he's like, okay, now you guys can do it standing up. and he would do that. Nobody got hurt. Everyone was fine. I don't know how many of their parents would have liked that, but this was back in the 70s when you could do that, and that was it. 4th of July on the Key was quite literally a blast. We made sure every summer vacation we'd stop in South Carolina, and the first stop he did, he'd stop at the cigarette shop, at the store, and buy cartons of Camels because they didn't have taxes on them in South Carolina, so we would stock up there. And as we'd go through the store with him there, then he promised to go to the fireworks store, and we'd go to those firehouses, and he would buy the biggest and baddest, what would now you'd get arrested for if you had those. But, so we would have that. I just remember in the street, he would light bricks of black cats. The whole brick he would light, and he would stand in the middle of it dancing around and yelling, and it was, and then me and some of my dumber friends would join him in that, jumping out there, and while they were going off, and he taught us how to hold bottle rockets and Roman candles so we could shoot them down the street, which ended up, we would have bottle rocket and Roman candle wars, which I don't think that was the plan, but he probably figured he knew that was what the next step was going to be for us. And then Halloween would roll around, and that was total insanity on that island. Shaving creams and eggs were a big part of that for me and my friends. Not for Diana, because she was sweet. She did not. And, we would get a ton of candy, but it would also be our empty spent shaving cream cans and maybe some eggs left that didn't break when we threw them or whatever would be in our bag. And so he said, okay, your candy's all messed up. You need to get a second bag next time and put your tricks over there and put your treats over here. So we did. And, he would dress me up as a bum. I'd have a ripped up t-shirt. He's like, we don't need to get a costume. He'd light a wine cork, smear it all over my face and my clothes, and send me out. And, one night we finished early and spent time in a hospital with a friend of mine who got punched by a kid from Coral Gables. But through all that, it was a great place to grow up, and, being a key rat is what we were called. We were the troublemaking kids. I was that David, and our friends were, about the same. But you could not be afraid to do anything on that island as a boy. If you were, you would be ostracized. Like if you were, being called chicken was a fate worse than death. So, and I look back later, and I'm like, that was his way of making sure that I was able to face the world and not die on that island. So, Christmas was great. Mom and Dad, they made sure that we had, so many traditions that they brought through their, childhood that we ended up with. And then my son Michael grew up with those. Diana's kids grew up with all those. And then Alyssa came in, and her kids ended up with those. And I'm sure that Diana will still say the same thing. Our kids are all grown, and we still do all those traditions, which is, fantastic. He always made sure to introduce, Dad always made sure to introduce and include Diana and me in so much stuff that he loved, from dirt bike riding, as you can see in one of the pictures back there, shooting guns, camping, car and boat racing, skiing, boating, so many other things. And one of my loves growing up was being an avid skateboarder, building ramps, building half pipes, just, going out there. And so he wanted to ride with me, so he learned how to ride a skateboard. And we'd go on vacation up in the mountains and ride in the hills and everything. And more than once, he got me in trouble with more than one park ranger. I think one time with Scouts, I got brought back to camp in the back of a park ranger car when I first noticed that they didn't have handles to get out. And he didn't get mad at me. He just kind of laughed. He thought, okay, well, good. Because I know he spent time in the back of a police car when he was younger too, huh, Sue? I think he borrowed his brother's car and was dating, the story was he was dating the police chief's daughter. He stole the police chief's fence, put it in the back trunk of his brother's car that his brother told him not to take, so his brother called the police, and yeah, so it was, and Dad let him sit in jail, so, That's what I grew up with. Those are the stories that I was raised with. And ended up leading to me kind of being a, you know, not a full juvenile delinquent, but, you know. So as I mentioned, he was a huge racing fan and started bringing Diana and me to races at a very young age. Sometimes for Diana, it may have been a little inappropriate at Sebring. But we had a great time there. He was teaching me lifelong lessons like how to sneak into the pits. And then once you were in, how to walk like you belong there so you don't get thrown out. And when we finally made it far enough to actually have pit passes, he taught me how to get the best pictures and stuff by going into the actual pit and staying until you got kicked out. And finally, the peak of that was the proper tools to carry to cut down and steal banners that were all around the track. To hang proudly in our garage. And finally, when we moved to Arizona, I had a garage that those were worthy for. And when he came out and visited the first time, he nodded his head in approval, like, good job, those are up. And, as of course, he taught Michael the same lessons as far as that goes, and so did I. And Michael snuck into his share in the pits when he was too young to. But it all worked out good for us. And as we got older, and I moved to Big Bear, Lake California, with my best friend Jim, right here, and to open up a Domino's Pizza. And we were two kids in California with our eyes wide open and no idea what was going to happen. And it was coming out thinking, we almost ended up in Blythe. Thank God that didn't happen. I don't know if you all have driven through Blythe, but it's on our way from Arizona, and that's, yeah. So, my dad was sad, but he was really proud that I was going out, and he had known Jim before that. Jim has been my best friend since I've been 18 years old. And, it was just, and looking around at the family and friends that we have here, if we didn't move, none of this would have happened. So, Michael was born a couple years later. Mom and Diana came out, I think Diana had enough of Miami. I know my mom did. And the first time Dad came up to meet his new grandson, me and Jim were at work, and I think Lori was there as well, and probably, I don't know if Michael's mom was, but he called he was up the hill in less than 30 minutes at night, his first time driving on it, and we're like, I don't know if you remember that. It was like, holy, I can't say it in here, but he was like, that was it. He's like, oh, that was awesome. He's like, oh, he goes, I haven't been on the road since, Lookout Mountain, when he used to drive cars and run away from the police up there. It's another story. But anyway, but at that time, my papa was still alive, or mine and Diana's papa was still alive. And so for Michael, that was his papa. So Dad was grandpa, which he loved. That was, his first. He would later become papa for Diana's kids, so he had the best of both worlds, be it a grandpa and a papa. So, and then years later, when Josh and Brittany and William and Tristan came into my life, it filled it out, and he was so happy. So, and he was still living in Florida, and we'd only see him Christmas and maybe one other time a year that he would come out. And when I was up in Big Bear, I ran a sheet metal shop, and I got season passes for doing work up at Snow Summit and Bear Mountain. And we would always make sure to go ski. He still skied, and we would always go skiing, him, me, and Michael, and we were snowboarding by then. But I think he loved the fact that I'd get up there and I would know, so many people up on the mountain, and I'd be able to get him free lift tickets and free rentals, and so he thought that was kind of cool. And, years later, we made the move from Florida to California. He made the move from Florida to California to be closer to this ever-growing and expanding family. And, I was pretty much done. Well, I thought I was at the time. But Diana and Dennis were just starting, and they were grandkids. She was popping them out like... And here they all are. And, so Dad would come out, I would watch the kids and everything, when they trusted me when they would go out of town to live in their house and take care of it. I think it was just Ethan and Peyton, no, Carson, I don't know, but whatever. So anyway, but they turned out all right, even with me around. So, So once Dad was out here, he was able to go to Michael's soccer games and hockey games, which made him so happy, and I know it made Michael happy too. And then, I'm sure Diana will talk about, he was very involved. He loved the grandkids sports. Like, just, that was, like he loved watching me and Diana when we were kids. We'd go to soccer games. She played soccer for a little while, and then she went to gymnastics meets, which lasted 12 hours. But I would go and support her. And I've always wanted to, but so as I grew up and became, as I was an adult now, he loved, again, it was like he became friends with, still my friends, as he did when I was a little kid, and became a big part of their lives also. He loved our driveway parties and, Halloween. He would dress up still to this day. He would just stand, and we'd have our house out here. We'd have Halloween parties and everything every year, bonfire, and we'd have bonfires going. He would love that. We'd go, where we just have parties just because it was a Saturday, and that's just what we did. So he was always there. He loved it. He loved hanging out with all the friends. He got close to everybody, cared about everybody a ton. He loved going to the Long Beach Grand Prix every year. Now that he had moved out here, he first went in the 70s with his best friend, Glenn, which I was telling you about. He used to call him John John. But he'd be out there with all of us, Bill, which my father-in-law, which they became great friends, and it was just like they had known each other forever. With Jim and Lori and our other friends, we'd all be there, and he'd be in his 70s, and we'd put 13 miles of walking in every single day, getting around that racetrack, going into the pits, going out of the pits, climbing up towers, over the walkways and everything. And, like I said, he would still, he'd be right with us and everything. Sometimes he'd be leading the charge. Like, come on, let's go. You guys are sitting around drinking too much beer. Let's get out of here. Let's go. We got practice coming up for whatever class it was. So it was nice. We all shared that with him. And even though we still had pit passes, like I said, he'd push the limits as far as he could, and banners were still not safe, even at his age. In the morning, we're all sitting around the car in the parking lot at Long Beach, because we kind of ran that place, and he'd have a Bloody Mary while Jim and Bill, Michael, and I were having beers with everyone else, and he might have a couple beers during the day, and then after the racetrack, he looked forward to, which the first year he didn't, he looked forward to going to Super Mex, because he said he didn't like Mexican food, and then all of a sudden he's like, I think I like Mexican food now. So I think that's where he really took a liking to that, was at Super Mex by our Fleabag Hotel. And he was so, when Michael, I'm sorry, I got to keep going, but he was so proud when Michael announced he was going to join the United States Navy and continue our family's tradition of serving our great nation. I was unable to serve because of my congenital nystagmus, which if you guys know, my involuntary movement of the eyes, I got to look sideways and stuff like that. They wouldn't have taken me. So again, that's probably a good thing, because we all wouldn't be here right now if that had happened. But yeah, and he always kept every stage of Michael's service. He always kept up with that. Every promotion made him prouder than the previous one. And when Michael made Navy Chief last year, it was like, he was so proud, as I am, obviously. Then I started dating Alyssa. And he knew this was, we were living together, me and Michael and Dad. We're all in there. There's some, memories there, good and bad. He couldn't spank me anymore, which was good, but he did a lot of that when I was a kid. So yeah, more me than Diana. I don't think Diana ever got spanked. Oh. But yeah, so, and he knew it was special in a relationship, and he loved her like a daughter, and her kids were his grandkids. And he made sure every year to send birthday cards, sometimes more than one, per person. He loved sending the cards. We still have most of them, I believe, and if he were ever late, he'd be like, oh, sorry, I got it out a day late if you don't have it yet. He was like, he was so, honorable, as you say. That was, his passion was that, to make sure that all of his grandkids and kids knew, and his family knew how important they were to him, and we knew. So when Alyssa and I said we were going to move to Arizona, again, he was sad, as were lots of our friends here. We were too. It was a decision that we had to make, and we were leaving, our families, and And then he knew when he first visited out there, and he drove into our neighborhood and looked where we were in this beautiful area of the desert. He's like, okay, I know why you came out here. You know, his first time visiting, he understood that. I think we went shooting, off-roading in our side-by-side. He met our neighbors. We had a driveway party like we still do to this day. You know, and just, you know, fit right in and knew everybody, and everyone loved it when he would come to town. So the last few times he drove out, we were kind of hoping he made it. Last time Alyssa and I drove with him in a car, red lights were optional. A suggestion, as he said. And he's like, nah, no one else was coming. Okay. And I told Diana that, and she just laughed and said, that's... So I look back over the years and all this stuff. I was raising Michael, and then later Josh, Brittany, William, and Tristan. You know, there was times I would say stuff, and I'm like, dang it, I'm becoming dad. And then now I appreciate that. So, you know, it wasn't all great times. We used to butt heads on some things. You know, he had a pretty bad temper, as some of you know. I got that temper. Well, him and my papa, he had a bad temper too. So, but I've gotten a lot better. Thank you, Alyssa and Jesus. And I've gotten older, but, you know, and looking back, that was a small blip on the radar with everything else that was just fantastic. You know, you look back and it was awesome. So, one of my happiest times, you know, I'm most thankful for, even though my parents split up, you know, when we were younger, unfortunately, they became best friends for the last 20 years of his life. And that was, he looked out for Mom like the way he always did. And that's, again, he's an honorable man. Last thing, I got to finish up so Diana can go. And say, like, whenever Diana and I would, he had these sayings, like growing up, all this stuff. And I still say them. But one of the biggest ones, and Diana will remember this, it's when we were kids and we were asking where we were going, we were always going to see a man about a horse. Always. And never once did we end up seeing that man, and we never ended up with a horse, but there it was. Still have no idea what that means. And whenever we would wish for something, excuse me, Pastor Bill, he would always say, wish in one hand and poop in the other. He didn't say poop, though, even when we were 5. It was the S word, and see which one fills up first. And, you know, I say that all the time. Alyssa, first time she heard it, she was like, what? What does that mean? I mean, Michael heard it growing up his whole life. So, you know, and, you know, another one, if he caught you asleep, he's like, what are you doing, checking your eyelids for holes? You know, and, you know, my favorite growing up, because it was me, always coming home hurt, banged up, having to get stitches. I think when I was a kid, I had over 100 stitches on my body before I was 12, maybe, I don't know. But he always would say, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough. So I thank him and God that I am tough, because these last 12 months have been the toughest in my life with everything we've gone through. My health, which is good again and great again, and just the loss that we've gone through in this family and with our friends. But we're all together, and thank God for that. And thankfully, I know he's looking down from heaven and is so proud of what this is, and what this family will continue to grow in his honor. And, you know, when the day after he passed, we had, out of the blue, an amazing double rainbow over our house, which, that was him. So, thanks for everything.
Okay, I'm going to try and hold it together. It's amazing to see the room so full. Some of you know this. I was the one that found my dad, and that's the reel in my head that's continuous of walking in his bedroom. It's so hard to get rid of, and seeing all of you here is going to change that reel for me, because just, he was loved. And all of you guys being here shows how loved he was. And I'm so appreciative that you guys could come out and just help us celebrate, take care of us while we're going through this. It's so appreciative. And I wish, Kendra, can you come here? Wait, bring your phone. Yes. We have to have a picture with everyone at every time we got together. We would always do a picture of the entire group. Well, it's 30 people or 10 people, but I just think he would be so tickled to see this room full of people that were here for him. So we're just gonna do a picture. Are we all in? Can you get everybody?
I think so. If everyone just squeezes in and leans in, I think we're gonna get us all.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay, I keep hearing from people, the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. And so here's my talk. Growing up with my dad was always an adventure. He and my mom gave David and I an amazing childhood. Even though they divorced when I was in 6th grade, you were in 9th grade, our daily life didn't change much. In fact, I think we saw Dad more. Except we got 2 holidays, 2 summer vacations, 2 winter ski trips to Colorado, 2 summer trips to, which when you're a kid, doubling up on all that stuff is nice. He always made sure that we experienced as much adventure as possible, camping and hiking for days on end up in the Smoky Mountains, snow skiing all over Colorado in the winter, water skiing on our boat during the summer, hitching our dirt bikes to the motorhome and taking off for long weekends to a motorcycle ride in the mud and shoot guns in the middle of nowhere, taking 3-day trips to car races, and learning all about racing, more than any 12-year-old girl should ever know about racing. And yes, seeing stuff that I was like, wow, is she wearing any clothes? What are they wearing at these races, the fans? But it was always a blast. He was a blast. Even with all the fun that we had with him, it's the little things that I remember the most. Waking up Saturday mornings to him blasting rock and country music, singing and clapping his hands, coming in our room to wake us up. It's how I came to love the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, Alabama, CCR, all the what's now classic rock. Well, that, and he would also play it in the car all the time. And no matter how many times I said, can you please turn this off? His response was always like, well, when you pay for the car, you can choose what's on the radio. And raise your hand if you're my child and you've heard that from my car. Yes, because I hear that. My kids have heard that from me. A simple little ritual he did with me that lasted for years. Didn't take a lot of time, but meant so much to me. He would sit me on his lap and sing, "You Are My Sunshine" to me, until I learned it as I got older, and we would sing it to each other. It was a small 30-second song, but meant so much, and that was so much that it was our father-daughter dance song at my wedding, because really nothing else would have felt as complete. He also stayed very involved in our sports. He never missed a soccer game of mine or David's. He made sure to be at all of David's baseball games, track and field days at school. He was always there with a camera strapped to his neck, taking copious amounts of pictures. When I was in 2nd grade and showed an interest in gymnastics after hearing him talk about his days on the gymnastics team at Florida State, he found a gym for me to start lessons. And on the little island where we live, there was only one place, and it had a floor exercise mat and an old wooden balance beam, and that was it, because it was actually a dance studio. But when my ability grew beyond that gym, he found one that would challenge me and help me grow to be the best gymnast I could be. He came to all my competitions, of course, taking pictures, and even found an accelerated gymnastics camp owned by former Olympians in Pennsylvania that I went to during the summer, and soccer camp for David in Connecticut. Yeah. Always supporting, always encouraging, always giving me the confidence when I was scared of a new trick, a bigger, louder gun, a steeper ski run, a new motorcycle jump. You name it, he was there with a gentle but firm push. Sometimes more not so gentle. I remember when he brought me a new motorcycle. I started out driving, well, with him. I would go on the front of his motorcycle in front, and he would take me around when they would always go motorcycle riding. And then I graduated to my own little Honda 75. And then he brought me a big bike right off the assembly line, brand spanking new. So pretty. It was white and blue, and I was looking at it going, I'm not going to get on that thing. But I did, and we were motorcycle riding, and he's jumping all over the place, and my dad is ahead, and I'm sitting on it going, and I was letting my fear get to me. I was not going as fast as I normally do. Didn't want to go into the mud because I was afraid I was going to fall. And he finally stopped, turned his bike around, parked next to me, and said, "I bought you that bike. Get on that thing and ride it like I know you can ride it now." And so I said, "Okay," and so I did, and then it was all fine. So sometimes it wasn't as gentle, but it was still a push, and he knew what I needed. He knew when it needed to be gentle, and he knew when it needed to be stronger. So as a grandpa, he doubled down on all that goodness. Once his grandkids started arriving, his trips to California from Florida became more frequent until he just couldn't stand being away anymore. He dropped everything and moved west. He lived with us for a while from the time Carson was a baby until we brought Jordan home from the hospital, and he also lived with David and Michael for a few years. Having him present in each of their daily lives cemented a solid relationship between all of his grandkids and himself. He never missed a milestone. None. No milestone he missed. He was at every graduation, every school play, school concert, sporting event, Grandparents' Day. He even volunteered in my kids' classrooms up across the street at Santa Cruz Christian. He would volunteer in their classrooms when they were in kindergarten. The parents knew him, which is evidenced by these amazing families from SCCS that came to celebrate his life with us because they were used to seeing him on campus and on all the events. He was Schwesinger's papa. When our kids got bigger and were all playing sports on Saturdays, he would gladly take the spreadsheet we would give him with all 5 of their schedules, where they had to be and what time, and he basically just stepped in where we had holes to fill so none of the kids were at a game without someone there to cheer them on. And as always, still had a camera strapped around his neck, taking pictures of football, soccer, basketball, hockey. You name it, he has pictures of it. When the kids were little, he would step in for 3 days every year to take care of all 5 of them so Dennis and I could have a getaway together. And he wouldn't just sit around the house with them. He would load them into their car seats and boosters, take them to dinner, like restaurants, not just like Burger King. He would take them to Olive Garden. He would take them ice skating. He would go to the ice skating rink with them at Valencia Ice Station. He would take them to the park. He would do all the activities with them all day, and then he would do the whole bedtime routine that they were used to doing with Dennis and I at the end of a long day. I don't know how he managed it on his own because it was a lot, just even for Dennis and I. But he did it. And I do know that when we got home from our trips, he skedaddled pretty quick. He was like, "See ya, I'm going home now." As they got older, he would meet them. As they got older, he would meet them for lunch and text with them and come over for dinner, even if it was just for an hour so he could see them and catch up. He did a great job of adapting to their lives as they got older and more independent. His deep presence in their life was such a blessing. Our kids grew up knowing their papa's life basically centered around them. His absence at Weston's last Grandparents' Day and high school graduation next year, and his empty seats in the football stands will be hard, but we know where he is, and we know he's still watching over us. The day after he passed away, I was in his home office trying to figure out where to start and what to do next. I turned around, and on his printer was the last thing he had printed up. From Paul, Philippians 4, 5-7. "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." I had been in his office just days before visiting with him, so I knew that this was something that he had just recently printed. I sat down and read it over and over again, feeling that peace wash over me and the overwhelming grief temporarily subside. I like to think he was preparing that for me because he knew I needed it. And as I started going through his house and his belongings, I found many printed notes with this verse in various places throughout his house. Clearly, it brought him peace too. My dad's faith was very strong. He loved his church and the people that make it up. He happily volunteered to help use his marketing skills background to grow attendance, hence the signs that he helped. It brought him great joy to see new faces on Sundays at church, and it made him so happy that I was so happy that he found a church he could call home. Because with his faith in Jesus, we know we will see him again. But for now, he's up in heaven, partying with Jesus, his parents, and his big brother, and family. It's hard to say goodbye to someone who's made such an impact on our life and who was so important. But I received something in the mail from a friend of his the week after he passed away that helps take the sting out a bit. This friend had lost someone close to her, and my dad sent a note to her to help her navigate through her grief. This is what he wrote, and I will close with my dad's own words of encouragement for all of us. The only way for any of us to join Jesus Christ in God's heaven is through death. We are saddened by the departure of our loved ones from our lives. We are saddened as we wish more people miss them the way we do. We are saddened that we didn't get to say all we wanted to say. We are saddened we didn't get to see them one more time. But I don't doubt for 1 minute the person who has just joined our Lord and Savior has any of these issues at all. When it comes to death, how can the relationship one had with the one who died ever end? They live on in our minds, in our hearts, and in our memories. We should thank God that they do, for without their life would have no legacy. To be remembered is quite wonderful and meaningful. Remember them as long as you can. Take them with you as long as you can. Rejoice that you knew them. Celebrate their lives. After all, what could make them happier than that?
Now, I think there may be a couple of the kids are going to get up and talk. Okay. There we go.
Hello. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan, and I am his favorite grandchild. That's why I'm speaking first. So I just want to talk about a few stories that I think really encapsulate the person he was. And so first, I'm going to open up. When we were little, and he would always be at our house. This is when we lived in Santa Clarita. And my parents they would go on trips, and so he would always watch us. So I do remember going to the skating rink, and I don't remember if I've ever went back, but I do remember skating, and I could do it. But I remember we had a little basketball court, and we had scooters, and when you're a little kid, like, you love getting attention. So, like, you love when the adults are, like, looking at you, and, like, you want to see their reaction. And so on a scooter, I would run around as fast as I could, and then crash, and then look at him and see his reaction, and he started to call me Crash, and I hated it. And then he also, after watching me play sports, he called me Crazy Legs. And I also hated that too. I think the guy's name was like Crazy Legs Jones or something. And some football player, and he's like Crazy Legs, and I hated him. But there's so many things that he did. Like, he was always there in our lives. And are there any like young children? Yes, there's a young child. Sleeping though. Okay, there's a young child. But so, Christmas, Santa Claus. And so every Christmas, our family would get around, we'd gather, we'd read stories, and then we're getting ready for bed. We all sleep in the same room, bring all the mattresses in, and then all of a sudden there's like a faint jingle, and it gets closer and closer. We start freaking out, like, oh my gosh, be quiet, we're gonna sleep. And then we go to sleep, then we go away, and I come right back around. And it was him, like running around the house with jingle bells, and the neighbors would be like, what's going on? But he would just be ringing the bells. And I mean, I believe Santa's real. I still believe it to this day because of that. But as we got older, we started to develop more of I could talk with him and just talk like normally just about my life and stuff like that. And so at Westie's football games, I was sitting in the stands. So I would sit in the stands with Kaylee and my grandpa. And I mean, he's not gonna be there anymore. So that means I have to sit with Kaylee. It's gonna be so much boring. It's gonna be really boring. I'm just kidding. But I remember I would always sit there. He'd have his binoculars. He'd be waiting. He had his little chair, too. And I started bringing him, that's a great idea. So I started bringing my chair, and he liked to talk a lot, which, I mean, I talk a lot, too. So maybe that's where I get it from. But he also talked a little bit quiet. And so you'd be trying to watch the game, and then he'd be saying something to you, and you're like, like when you ask someone and they repeat it and you still don't understand? And so every once in a while that would happen, be like, oh, yeah, and you have to laugh. And so sometimes I wonder what he was saying, but I guess we'll never know. Well, not yet. But, and so I'm definitely going to miss that, like going to those games and talking with him and sitting with him. And, yeah. And so, what else? There's one more thing. Oh, there's a couple more things. One, Florida State, baby. That's right. So, and I will not be going to Florida State because humidity is crazy. So, California weather is nice, but not the humidity. But I will continue to root them on. I asked his license plate, it says FSU. And so I asked for that because it's like perfect. I remember he would always text me the game times. He's like, hey, the game time's at this. I hope you're watching. And so we always talk about that whenever he came over. And then to just demonstrate the presence, that his presence was so constant in our lives. And specifically mine, like they said, he always loved coming to our games. So he came to every single game. especially if my parents were there, he was there. He'd take us there, get food after. But this past year, I've had so many issues with like getting back. I'm injury prone, all right? I got like my bones, not my bones, my tendons snap like crazy. So I had been trying to play football for a long time. And this past year, I was playing up at Moore Park College. And this is when he had just moved out in the area, and he started coming to my practices. He was the only person, only parent watching the entire practice. He would sit there with his binoculars, watching me, and he'd talk to me for like 10 minutes after. And then I would have to let him know, like, hey, I'm actually not practicing today. So I was so nice to have that support there, especially when it felt like I was working back from something that was really hard. So having that support there was always really nice and a great presence in my life. And this is the story that I think about the most when I think about him. This happened probably about last year, and probably 2 years ago I started collecting vinyls. And unbeknownst to me, he had a ton of vinyls. And so when he found out, he was super excited. And so he started bringing them to me in like droves, faster than I could listen to him. And so one day, I'm like sitting on the couch, and he's like, hey, Ethan, like, come here, I got some more vinyls for you. He takes me out to his car. It's like 30-something vinyls, all right? And he starts picking them up one by one, talks for like a couple minutes about it, and tells me about it. He's like, do you want it? I'm like, yeah. And except I'm holding them. And so it goes one at a time. So it's probably like half an hour. My arms start shaking and I'm like, I'm starting to lose track of the stories because he keeps talking like, okay, like, yeah, I want that one, let's go, hurry up. And just thinking about that, I'm so happy that like he was so excited about that. And I have those vinyls and I'm still listening to them, and anytime I listen to them, like, that's what I think about. And anytime I get any vinyl, I'm like, oh yeah. So, essentially, his constant presence in our life made us feel so loved. And I know that he's probably up there in heaven getting Jesus to make the Indy 500 a thing. So, all right. Thank you.
Hello, I'm his granddaughter, Jordan. I believe I'm the favorite based off all the things that he brought me this past school year. You know, the FSU hats, a lot of jewelry, nice jewelry. But I know a lot of people say this, but I'm fully convinced that I actually had the best grandpa in the world. Some of my favorite memories with him were waiting in the kitchen for him to finish making his famous hot chocolate that he would always make when he was babysitting me and all my siblings. And then also just doing little tricks that me and my siblings would do with him, like when we were younger. We would do little like flips off of him. He would like hold our hands and we would just like propel off of his legs. And no matter how many times we asked to do it, he would always say yes. I don't ever recalling hearing a no. But I'm so grateful that I got to come back from school so much this year to sit with him at football games when I could, all my brother's games. And I'm so glad that I got to spend that time with him after he spent so much time like watching my games and all that. I know that at some points when we were younger, my family would have 4 football games in one day, and only 2 parents to watch and drive. And so my grandpa consistently helped in any way that he could. So he ended up taking me to so many of my games. And for most of them, there was no problem, except for one. There was one time I had a game at Westlake High School. I was probably around 11 or 12. No sense of direction or really awareness of where I was at. So we pull up to the parking lot already a little bit late, and we don't see my team anywhere. So we think they're probably already down at the field. But then we quickly realized that we had no idea how to get to the field. And so for the next 45 minutes, we looked around the campus, walked a block or 2 down the street, walked through some construction, walked up the side of a mountain, still lost. Thankfully, we found one person who led us through some like gates, threw up the side of the mountain again, and we found the stadium 2 minutes before the game started. And after my family moved out to where we live now a couple years ago, and I started going to the school right across the street from that, I would pass that school every day on my way to my school, and I would see that place and just be reminded of that time, and I just picture a little girl with all of her football gear and a grandpa walking down the side of the street frantically, looking completely lost. But I'm just so thankful that I got to spend that time with him for all the times that he took me to my games successfully, and that time. But my grandpa was the type of person that really listened to you. For example, a year or two when I was thinking about what college I wanted to attend to and what major I wanted to study, he would often ask me how all of it was going. And I remember one time I told him that I was planning on doing engineering, but I wasn't exactly sure what type of engineering I was doing yet. And so then he proceeded to go home, do some research about the different types of engineering, find several articles about it, print it out, and then put them in a file. And the next time he saw me, he gave me this file of all the different types of engineerings and the differences between them. But just things like that really showed that he listened to every word that I said and just truly wanted to help me in any way that he could. My grandpa was also probably my biggest supporter and encouragement. I could go to him when I wasn't feeling great, when I was worried about something coming up, or just when I thought I couldn't do anything, and all that doubt would just disappear after just talking to him for a second. He would ask me about everything that was going on in my life, and I would go on and on. And I would just go on and on about anything and everything going on in my life and what I was doing. And he would say to me with such admiration in his eyes, "Is there anything you can't do?" And I would instantly be lifted. I could truly be myself around him because I knew he would never judge. Even little things, like this little thing that he would do with his lip, he would like quiver it really fast, I don't know. And he would be like, "Can you do that?" And I would do it, and he would just be like, "Wow, that's amazing. Like, not many people can do that." So just little things like that. I'm so grateful for him for making the little things more significant and just celebrating that with me. And I will forever be grateful for the way he allowed me to be more sure of myself when I was around him. I'm so thankful for all the memories that I've gotten to share with him, all the lifesaver mints he's giving me over the years, all the little bits and jokes that I've adopted from him over the years, all the sports games, whether sitting with him or getting lost with him on the way, all the check-ins he would do with me, and all the "is there anything you can't do's." Thank you, Papa, for making me who I am, and I love you, miss you so much.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you again for coming. I think I recognize almost everyone here, but for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Peyton, and I am the oldest granddaughter. I'm not going to get into the favorites game, because it was obviously me on Dennis's and Diana's side. When I sat down to write this tribute, I found that it was difficult to pick just a few stories that represented who my grandfather was to me and everyone around him. He's in every one of my key memories: grandparents' day in elementary school, soccer games, basketball games, graduations, musicals, holidays, and everything in between. As I look back over all these times, 3 words came to mind that truly define the person I knew my grandfather to be: fun-loving, intentional, and proud. My grandpa made his own fun everywhere he went, whether performing gymnastics moves on telephone poles, spontaneously Irish clicking his heels in public, or cracking the same jokes about the best time to see the dentist. As kids, he was the ultimate babysitter. Every morning, breakfast featured homemade hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and mounds of ice cream. He was larger than life, always looking to make people around him laugh and always finding childlike joy and adventure in everyday things. To know my grandpa was to know his smile, his laugh, and his side-eye wink when he was up to something. He was also one of the most intentional people in my life. When he showed up for one of us, he showed up for all of us. I spent several Saturday nights with Jordan and Ethan in the last few years sitting in the stands with him while we watched Weston play football. Inevitably, he always seemed to have an extra jacket lying around just in case I got cold. He also had a trusty mini cooler stocked with cold waters and usually some mints or candies in his jacket pocket that he offered continually throughout the game to make sure that we weren't hungry. It was always clear to me while sitting next to him, huddled under the extra jacket and enjoying a mini Snickers bar, that he put thought into each of those items and brought extra just for us. Not only did he show up to everything that me and my 4 other siblings participated in, but he always went out of his way to initiate conversation, see what was going on in my life, and check in on my future plans. The conversations usually went something like this. "Oh, good to see you. How are you?" And I'd say, "I'm good. Super busy, but good. I'm wrapping up some things for class, and I have some fun weekend plans coming up. How are you?" He'd say, "Good, good. Are you getting enough sleep?" And I would say, "No, not really, but things are slowing down, so I should be able to get more soon." And we both knew that was never going to happen, but we would pretend it would. And then we move into a conversation about my travels and where I had just been, what I had seen, and where I was going next. He always asked questions or gave recommendations if it was somewhere he had been before. New York was a special favorite for both of us, as he often talked about the feeling of walking down Wall Street in the snow during his first winter when he lived there. I will forever miss the chance to relive my adventures with him and to hear about all of his own. The last word that really defined my papa was proud. He was proud of everyone around him, family, friends, colleagues, and was always spreading the word about their successes or accomplishments. I got to witness a special form of this with his kids and grandkids. There was several times that he would excitedly tell me about a new feat performed by one of my own siblings, whether a new track record, a healed injury, or a good grade. Sometimes I had known about it, sometimes I hadn't, but it was always so sweet to see how much joy he got from celebrating our accomplishments. One of my last conversations with my papa took place in the hospital a few days before he was released. The meds had him a little loopy, and he was talking to us like we were part of the new marketing team for a cruise ship he had worked with back in the day. And he was talking about current problems and the bad food and the pillows and new initiatives and the agenda for the rest of the day, thinking that he was talking to some of his old partners from his old firm. We were just listening, kind of getting to hear a little bit about what those days were like for him. And at one point, he stopped and looked right at me. And then he said, "This is my granddaughter." He said this to me. "This is my granddaughter, Peyton. She's a summa cum laude graduate of UCLA Medical School," which, just college, but that was close enough. I'll take it. "And she really loves to travel. She'll be doing a lot of traveling. We are so excited to have her as part of the team." While his brain might have been muddled by the medications, I knew then that some part of him had recognized me, and the emotion that shone through it all was pride. I'm not quite sure what this next phase of life looks like without him in it. I do know that I will feel his absence deeply at every game, event, milestone, success, or failure. I also know that he would have wanted us to keep finding the joy in everyday things, to keep pursuing our passions fiercely and unapologetically, and to be deeply involved in the lives of those we care about. So, Papa, I'm doing pretty well, but I still miss you. I got married, and it was an amazing day. We saved you a seat with your pinstripe suit. You would have loved to see it, and you would have been the life of the party. I'm still working on finding a job. It might end up in marketing. Wouldn't that be cool? Westy won the 100-meter race for all of Ventura County yesterday. You definitely would have been in the stands for that. I'm finally doing better at sleeping enough, but we'll see how long I keep that up for. I have a trip to Portland next weekend to visit some friends, so that should be fun. I wish I could tell you all about it when I get back. I'm so thankful that I was blessed enough to have you as my papa. You're the best one in the entire world. I hope you are still clicking your heels up in heaven, and I know you will be watching out for all of us down here. I'll save you a seat and a mint at Westy's next football game. We love you and miss you always.
Remember I talked about how we remember? You notice what she said is the first reference in all of this to something he did for a living. That was the first time anybody mentioned anything he did, any work that he did for a living. The memories aren't shaped there, are they? They're shaped in the heart and in Anybody else have something they want to share? Okay, one more.
Good afternoon. I have the honor of having known John longer than anybody here because I'm his younger, much younger sister, Susie. And I feel like I'm so connected with all of y'all for various reasons, but first of all, because Sandy and I were sorority sisters at FSU, and humidity is great. And it's an awesome school, and you should go there. But we were sorority sisters, and I have the pleasure of introducing and setting up John and Sandy's first date. So, all of y'all have to thank me. But also because John would call me weekly. I lived in Tallahassee for 50 years, but now I live in Alabama, southern Alabama. But he would call me weekly and let me know what each of y'all were doing, always. So, and I had a horrible time keeping y'all straight and who was who, but for that reason, I feel like I know you all well, and also that I was able to introduce Sandy and John. But I think of John now as he's cruising with Jesus, and we're all going to see him again.
Memory is such a powerful thing, isn't it? I want to close with just this picture. It was something that I did a service with a friend at a Christmas service at Eternal Valley at the mortuaries one Christmas, and Father Stan Harris, and he got up and said something, and I love telling the story because, you know, we're at Christmas. It's Christmas, right? And he starts talking about the book of Hebrews. And he reads this passage in Hebrews. It says, and so since we have this great crowd of witnesses, let us run the race before us. And I'm thinking in my mind, Stan, where are you going with this? And then what he said was this. He said, number one, that's the picture of a stadium. And everybody in heaven is in the stadium. And watching, to use your terminology, y'all. All y'all. Cheering you on. And then he said this. He said, after the resurrection, the apostles were locked in a room upstairs, afraid for their lives. And it says Jesus just appears. Suddenly he's there. And he says, peace, peace, don't be afraid. And what he did was he connected those two passages. And his idea was this, and I love this thought. Heaven isn't a place far, far away. Heaven is a place on the other side of the window. We were talking about God being made in our image. And God is in eternal time, eternal space and time. And he created our chronological time in a little four-dimensional box that has a beginning and an end. And and when we get to be with him in heaven, we get to be part of that. And so when you get to the next game, he's watching. That's the very picture from Hebrews. He's watching. And when you need that encouragement, stop for a moment. Remember? You'll hear his voice in your head. You'll remember something that he said to lift you up. That's the impact of a life. And so you want to carry that with you. Do we understand all of this? No. Jesus showed up at a service like this. In his day, the services went on for days. marriages and wedding receptions lasted 3 to 5 days. This kind of thing would last 3 to 5 days because people were walking. And his friend Lazarus had passed, and he gets there, and Lazarus' sisters, each of them 2 different times, come out. You got up and, being a sister made me think of it. Came out to Jesus. Both of them, the scripture really doesn't give us a lot of detail, but you get the idea that they got right up in his face and said, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. If you had only been here. And Jesus said, well, you believe all going to rise again? He said, yes. And he said, well, I am the resurrection and the life, and he who believes in me will live even though he dies. And what Jesus did with their grief, he pointed it to him, and he took it, and he made it a promise. So just remember that. The good news and the bad news. John, Papa, Grandpa is watching and cheering you on. Remember, share, honor. Live those memories out. Give it to each other. Find the best in him and make it the best in you. Father, we thank you for John's life. We thank you for our friend. We thank you for the impact he had on every person in his family. We thank you that in all of the things that were shared today, it was all about this man's love that he shared with everyone. Man, Lord, that's so well like you. We thank you for that life. We're glad he's there with you. And we're glad he's there to join that crowd in the stadium cheering us on. And we thank you for loving us so much that you gave us not only your son, that we might have this life, but you give us the people in our lives to share that love with us. Bless us with your peace and your love today. We thank you. We thank you for the gift of John's life. It is now ours. We have received it. Help us carry this gift with honor. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Y'all go now. No, there's cookies over here. Whatever you want to have some cookies and stand around and visit for a while, you're more than welcome to do that. Let's, don't stop sharing the memories. All right? Thank you all for coming.